We are so excited to have you here. We, are thrilled to have such a wonderful turnout. And I actually grew up in Westchester and had coyotes that lived in the woods off my house my entire life. So, we never had any coexisting with coyotes has been part of my life. So really excited for this and excited for our panelists and excited for you all to join us. And now I'll give it over to my host and president, Hildur. Welcome, Hildur.
Thank you, Kristen. Kristen Laird, she is now running the show at the Science Museum of Long Island together with Hus Kivrak. So Kristen Laird is our new executive director, and Hus directs education, and he's here with us tonight as well. And my name is Hildur, and I am the president of the board of trustees at SMLI. And on behalf of the board, I would like to thank you all for trusting us with your time tonight. And I hope it will be worthwhile. I'll start with saying, in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, it's not every day that we hear of a new mammal in town. But given the controversial nature of the coyote, we are very interested in learning more from the experts here tonight. And we're thankful for our distinguished panelists for taking the time to be with us. We'll dedicate the first half hour to basic education, as I believe it's from there that we can have a healthy conversation on this topic. I will be sharing resources with you throughout the meeting and afterwards by email. And yes, we are recording, and we will be sharing the recording via the SMLI YouTube channel. So you have to know that if you participate and speak up in the recording, we cannot edit it out afterwards. But if there's anything you'd like to ask anonymously, I'll be here with responding to sensitive asks in the chat. You can chat either to everyone or to me directly or the other hosts, but refrain from sending the panelists a message while they're presenting. So as I said, the first 30 minutes are dedicated to education, and then we'll open up to audience participation. In the interest of time, and given the number of attendees registered, I'll introduce our panelists with a very brief bio, and I'll copy the longer bio into the chat so you can know their full credentials. But I'd like to start now with Professor Lisa Filippi. Lisa is a behavioral ecologist and a professor of biology at Hofstra University, where she has been teaching since returning to New York 20 years ago. As a member of the Long Island Coyote Study Group, she is currently monitoring a recently established coyote family living in Western Nassau County. So Lisa, I'll give the word to you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Hildur, and everyone for having me, and for to the guests for joining us tonight. These are the Coyotes, our new members in our communities all over Long Island, and so we've been looking for an opportunity to share our interest in them and to help people feel a little more comfortable about having them around. So I'm going to begin by going over a little bit of the ecology, the life history, some of the behavior, talk about how coyotes came to be on Long Island, how we suspect they did. Okay, let's see if we can get this going. Okay, so first of all, coyotes are apex predators. And that means that they are at the top of the food chain. I'm sure everybody understands that. Their original habitat out in the Midwest was grasslands, but they're super, super adaptive. So they can live everywhere. And they're super clever. And those of us that are, well, I'm aging myself here, but the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote cartoon didn't get its name for no reason at all. Coyotes really are clever, and that's where Wile E. Coyote comes in. Somehow people, even the cartoonists, recognized that way back then. And so they are super clever. They eat meat, they eat fruits, they eat seeds, and they typically hunt alone, but they can hunt in packs. And did I mention that they are clever? And this is what contributes to their really incredible adaptability. They're mating right now. So the population that we're monitoring right now, they should be mating, and the young will be born in the early spring. They can have 1 to 12 pups, but you're never going to see 12 pups. And on average, 6. And that's even a lot, really. And they have biparental care, which means mom and dad both take care of the kids. They're both responsible for the feeding, but they essentially stay as a family until the pups get a little bit bigger, maybe a year, sometimes a year and a half. But unlike wolves, they're not typically hanging out as a pack and functioning together, although they do have some pack-like activity at times. They're highly adaptable, which means any food that you give them, they will like. And looking at their poop, which is what I've been doing for the past 2 years, lets you know that they eat almost anything. They have a natural instinct to avoid humans. And that's the thing that we want to focus on tonight. We want to maintain that natural instinct. We don't want them to get habituated to humans, because that's where problems can arise. They're beautiful, and we, have those of us that like canines or canids have an instinct to want to become friendly with them, but that's something we're not supposed to do. Okay, and when we say highly adaptable, it's not just food, but they can, as I said, they originated in the savannas and prairies, but now they can live in forests. They live they love golf courses, grasslands, things like that. So they're highly adaptable. Okay, I'm trying to get used to this computer. That's not my computer. Oh dear. It will not move. Okay, Otosan. Tsugi no slide ni ikanai. Sorry, everybody. Oh, there we go. Okay. I don't know how I've got it to go, so I hope we stay smooth here.
Okay.
All right, so life history changes that can occur in urban settings, and those are things that we want to watch out for. Okay, so the first one is when they're in an urban setting, they tend to get larger and heavier, and that's because they have more opportunity to eat. There's more foraging, there's garbage pails, there's restaurants that dump their stuff outside. And so we suspect that that's why they don't have to struggle as much to get their food when they're closer to human habitats, which is another reason why we shouldn't leave any sort of food around. The litter size can get larger when the population size decreases, which makes it very difficult to get rid of coyotes. People have tried, and it doesn't work because the neighboring coyotes will just make more puppies when they recognize that somebody's been eliminated from the area. The litters get larger because there tends to be more food. The lifespan can be longer, again, because they don't have to work as hard for food and they have more access to it and healthy diets. And they tend to have smaller territories in urban areas because there's more food in a concentrated area and they don't have to spread out as much to get the food that they need. So these are differences that have been observed mostly by studies from Chicago. That's the biggest urban population that we have in the country. And again, they adapt to and are highly successful in a whole variety of habitats, which makes it difficult. A lot of animals will only want to live in a certain discrete type of habitat, but coyotes can really manage anywhere. Okay, this is kind of a dorky slide that I put together. And what I have here is I'm trying to explain how they came to be on Long Island and how coyotes came to the east. And this is mostly what we are, I mean, it's the best hypothesis that we have to explain how coyotes moved to the east, especially the northeast. So originally, most of them were here. Can you see my icon moving around? Yeah, okay. So most of them were here in the Midwest, in the prairie lands and the savannas. And then the pioneers came. These are the pioneers. Native Americans were here, but their populations were so dense, so sparse that it doesn't really impact the wildlife. And they live in a way to not impact wildlife, if we can understand that. So the pioneers come, and the pioneers come with their livestock and with their pets. So we got cattle, and we got sheep and pigs and donkeys and geese and such, right? And there are wolves, lots of wolves in the east and the northeast. So there are wolves in Canada, wolves in the northeast of the United States. And that was a problem for the pioneers as they moved into the United States. And so, is it going to work? Yes, started killing off the wolves. So the X's are telling us about the wolves that were getting wiped out. So most of the wolves, which were the largest predators, wolves are larger than coyotes, got wiped out from the northeast. And there were just a few, like this little guy, left over. And we had a couple of wolves coming down from Canada. And because the niche that the wolves had been inhabiting was now became a void, the coyotes started to move east. The wolves were keeping the coyotes east. That's what we're considering, because the wolves are much larger than the coyotes and didn't want to share the habitat. So once the wolves were not, were very sparse in the northeast, then the coyotes started moving east. You like that guy running across the map? And what they were doing was they started to mate with the few wolves that were left in the northeast. And so the coyotes in the West and the Midwest are much smaller than the Eastern Coyote, because the Eastern Coyote is actually what we call an ad hybrid, ad mixed. It's a mixture of wolf, about 30% genes wolf, but it's also got dog genes, and it's pretty large compared to the Western Coyote. So that's our Eastern Coyote. They're all moving. Okay, so this is how they spread. Now, how did they get to Long Island? So they started out in the Northeast and they started spreading out. They went to, this is all New York. So they spread out all over New York. They were in, they're all over these areas, these states, okay, forested areas. And then they were in Connecticut, okay? And so from Connecticut, it's considered that they went to New York, through Westchester, okay? And they went to the Bronx, they went to New York City. And then from New York City, they came to Long Island. So that's how they got here. So some of them, there's an island out here, I believe it's this one, Fisher's Island. It's likely that at least a couple of the coyotes that we now have on Long Island swam to some of the islands between Connecticut and Long Island and then managed to swim here. But most of them probably came via this route through Connecticut to New York City and down. They come by bridges, they swim, they take railroad tracks, they follow the railroad tracks, and they manage to get here. We've had coyotes in Manhattan for a while. In the Bronx, there's been breeding pairs in the Pelham Park, in the golf courses around there. And so it's a natural expansion down to Long Island. So now we have coyotes coming down to Long Island here. And both of these maps were put together by my graduate student, Stephanie Murata. And so, you know, they were in Queens, they were in Brooklyn, just a few of them. And so initially we just have like one or two lone coyotes that separate from their parents. And they're like nomads and they're roaming around by themselves until they happen to find a mate. And then the mates end up establishing territories. And that's when we start, that's about where we are now, where we're getting mates, establishing territories, and they're starting to breed. And so we've seen coyotes all throughout Long Island. Wherever you see stars on this map, we have reported sightings of coyotes. In Western Nassau, we have a couple of breeding pairs that are being monitored, and we are trying to monitor sites where we think they're going to find their way to, because they're very appropriate habitats. And then we still probably have some coming over from Connecticut. So that's how they got here. And so what I want to stress, let me just go back, is that some people say that they're an invasive species and they don't belong here, this and that. But animals are always changing their range based on the habitat that they're in. It's just a natural, we don't call this an invasion, we call this a natural expansion of a species. This is perfectly natural. It's not anything that anybody did. Nobody brought them here. It's a natural expansion. Okay. And so I just want to expel that myth to begin with. So interestingly, these are the predators, mesopredators, the big predators that used to be on Long Island until they were extirpated by all the pilgrims and pioneers. So we had black bears on Long Island. We had bobcats and beavers and wolves. And we had these larger animals that probably kept the deer and other animals in check. And we don't have any of those anymore. We don't have mesopredators. The eagles also disappeared from Long Island. Those are also apex predators, and they disappeared because of poisons in the water that killed the fish. And all of our hawk-like birds disappeared, birds of prey, for a while, but now they're back because we've cleaned up our act, thank goodness. So there's nothing, you know, it's very, very reasonable that we have an apex predator now coming back to Long Island. And one of the good things is that we have a great opportunity for ecological studies because Long Island is one of the last land masses on the contiguous United States to actually have this apex predator come to us. Okay, they're all over there in Chicago. I'll show you some maps later on, but they're everywhere. And the thing is, when you have them newly expanding into an area, you get an opportunity to do lots of really cool ecological studies because you have before and after abilities to examine the ecosystems. So one of the things that we're doing is doing DNA studies. Every 2 weeks, I go to the site that I'm monitoring and we collect scat. I'll show you a nice picture of that. Hope you finished your dinner. And we collect scat and we're sending it out for DNA so that we can test the relatedness for of our coyotes with the coyotes in different regions in the surrounding area. We want to do diet studies across the year to see what it is that they're eating. We can hopefully get some information. We don't have enough of them on the island yet to do a whole lot of studies, but eventually it would be nice to see how they are affecting the other mesopredators like foxes. We have fox on the island. And see if we have raccoons. We want to look at the impact that they have on deer and geese populations. And we actually have some evidence that this poor guy, he was filmed at my site, is no longer with us. And it seems that coyotes probably took him down, so they can control deer as well. And
No,
lots
they
of
can't
feeds.
control deer.
No, they, well, not control them. I don't mean control, but they do feed on them. Okay. They're not going to control probably any of these animals. Okay. However, they're going to eat them to some extent. Okay. So these are the mesopredators that we have now before the coyotes came. These are from my site, lovely little raccoons. And these are pictures taken by Scott Matheny, who is a fabulous photographer. These are animals on Long Island, bald eagle and the red fox. And the coyote is just one more. And this is what I do at my site. I collect scat and we measure it. You can see there's hair in this. So this is most likely coyote scat. And I got my little stick chopsticks and we pick up the coyote scat and dump it in a bag and we send it off to the lab. Lots of fun. And these are some pictures just to show you that they come in all different colors, different sizes. And this is a coyote family. And that's it.
That's wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you.
actually, these are urban coyotes. Oh, that's one more thing that I wanted to point out. These are different sites all over the country. So this is New York City. This is Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and every city in the continental United States has coyotes. And so everybody around the country has been living with them for decades and managing quite fine. And that
Yes.
I see that.
Is it correct that they haven't made it to Hawaii?
Probably not. They have not made it to Hawaii. That's
Yes.
true.
JetBlue fly there?
Huh?
Does JetBlue fly there? Then maybe they'll buy a ticket.
So I had a quick question from someone in the audience directly to me where they asked, how far can they swim?
That's a good question, and I have no idea. Probably Mike would know that better, but
Yes.
They
So
got-
that's a good segue into Mike's presentation. Mike, are you,
Yeah, actually, I think Frank's going next, isn't he?
no, I thought you were going to go next.
Oh, okay. All right.
all right.
I'm all
So let
set.
me just say about the swimming.
Oh,
We're not
it's 2
quite
miles,
sure.
Lisa. We
2
know
miles?
they've swum 2 miles, but we don't
Okay.
have an exact number on that.
And
Okay.
let me formally introduce you, Mike. with a brief bio. I'll include the larger bio in the chat. Mike Bottini is a wildlife biologist with Seatuck Environmental Association, whose study subjects have included river otters, spotted turtles, coyotes, and piping plovers, and many more. Mike is the founder of the annual Long Island Natural History Conference. And we are now seeing Mike's slides. Thanks, Lisa. I look forward to the Q&A part where we'll all continue learning more. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Hildur. So yeah, I just wanted to mention a few things about the group. We have quite a large group of people, including some people like Lisa that are involved with universities in the area, and a bunch of conservation organizations, staff from South Fork Natural History Society, the Green Tree Foundation, Seatuck, and Brookhaven National Lab, and then a bunch of agencies, the DEC, of course, New York State Parks has been involved, and the National Park Service folks on Fire Island. And we even have a group led by Mike Vitti that some of you may know, Concerned Long Island Mountain Bikers. They've done some great stuff, setting up some cameras and monitoring a couple sites. So kind of a fun group to work with. And I'm just going to quickly go over some of the goals. So our study group has 4 main goals right now. One is documenting the establishment of coyotes on Long Island. And this is done through a variety of things, mostly getting photographs from cameras that we set out. And also we receive a lot of photographs from folks that just happen to have trail cameras out in their favorite neck of the woods. And they send those to us. We also, we try and retrieve the roadkills. These unfortunate events, we can get a lot of great information from them, including some DNA workup and genetic material. And then the last thing here is tracks. So this different kind of sign, tracks and scat. And I'll go over that a little bit more detail later on. That's a little tricky, but there's a couple of things that you can keep in mind when you're out in the field and learn that. So the other thing is monitoring the impacts of coyotes on our flora and fauna. And Lisa went over that, so I'm just going to skim through this. This is Lisa setting up a camera at her study site. And also, as she mentioned, collecting the scat. So the scat is going to be mostly material from the prey that the coyote has eaten. This happens to be, obviously, it's eaten some kind of a mammal. It's mostly hair, and then inside would be some bone material. And we can do DNA work on that. You can also look at the hairs under a microscope, and by the pattern under a microscope, you can get it down to species. But on the outside of the scat, you can scrape off some cell material that can be analyzed to get the DNA, the genetic material of the coyote itself. There'll be some material from its digestive system. And that work is being done a combination of American Museum of Natural History and Hofstra University right now. We also train volunteers to assist in field work. These folks are master teachers, actually, and they're looking at some circles drawn in the sand there in a creek bed, and they're looking at some fresh coyote tracks, coyote scat, and there was actually a short-tailed shrew that the coyote caught the night before. And because that has a poisonous taste to it, very distasteful, and the coyote killed it but didn't eat it, just left it there. And so we also go over tracking skills. This is a domestic dog track, and you can see how the nails in here are very blunt, and the toes tend to splay out in all directions, in addition to pointing straight ahead off to the side. And this is a red fox. This is another canid that can be confused for coyote. We have a lot more red foxes at this point in time on Long Island than we have coyotes. And very different from a domestic dog track. And one of the reasons for that is that the morphology of the foot, this is a front foot and that's a front foot track, especially in the winter, during the winter season, it's just so much fur on the bottom of the foot that the toe pads don't register very well. But over here, you can see a couple things. Once the track is sort of roundish, and these little nail marks, the red fox is very sharp, as with all the wild canids, very sharp nails. And then the heel pad shows up as a bar, even though it's triangular. If you remove the hair out of the way, it generally shows up as a line. And in comparison, this is the coyote's front foot. So you can see a big difference. Both of these photographs were taken in the winter. And this is the coyote track, a little more oval shaped, but check out the nails. Very sharp, and they're all pointing straight ahead. The toes are pretty much pointed all straight ahead. And it's very different from a domestic dog in general. But the other thing that's very important, and we go over on the field workshops, is you really need to look at the big picture as well. And you need to look at what we call the gait. And this is a red fox gait, but a coyote gait will be very similar. They don't wander around and waste energy. They basically are cruising through their hunting grounds in a fairly straight line, and the tracks are the rear feet land in the front foot track, so it's a direct register. And it kind of looks like a pogo stick went through the snow there. And then the last and probably the most important thing right now is what we're doing right here. We're educating Long Islanders on how to best coexist with coyotes. This is going to be, although as Lisa said, they're all over North America, including in all the big urban cities. But it's new to Long Islanders, so it's a little daunting, you know. So people need to learn a little bit about it, and one of the things that we're doing is doing some workshops and these kind of meetings where we'll explain the ecology and behavior of coyotes. We also made up a flyer that we've given out to all the municipalities on Long Island, so they have that. Okay, so I wanted to point out to this website at seatuck.org. It's called the Coyote Tracker thing. So if you see or get a photograph, you can go through the site and learn a little bit about the things that you can learn to distinguish between the coyote and other wild canids and domestic dogs. So it's a useful site. I still haven't gotten the tracking part in there, but I'm going to just go through some of the information. So this is where you could actually record your sightings for us to look into. This actually is one of our study sites, and where you want to look for coyote scat is where these trails intersect. These are their hunting grounds. They can move quickly and quietly along the paths, and they'll mark these areas. So the scat is in the red circle here, very close to the intersection. So one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is they don't understand that coyotes have a summer coat and they have a winter coat. And they look very different. So coyote on the left has its short-haired summer coat, and it looks more long-legged. And the one on the right is a photograph of a coyote from Fisher's Island that looks much more robust and not as long-legged. It's just the winter coat. And I have these red arrows on the coyote on the left to point to two key things. ID features says the black tip of the tail and this black area where there's a scent gland just below where the tail attaches to the rump. Those are dark hairs that mark a scent gland. Now on the Fisher's Island coyote, being kind of a blonde colored one, it's not going to be black, it's just going to be a dark, those are going to be dark hairs in those two spots. So you want to look for that. And here we have similar situation. We have a female here on the left in her summer coat, nursing her pups. And we have a more typical classic red fox look here in the winter coat. And I don't think anyone would mistake the one on the right for a coyote. But and I'll get to it a little bit later, there are some cases when it's in the summer coat, when the red fox is in its summer coat and it's young, it can be mistaken for a coyote. The key thing here is the red fox has a couple key ID features. The black ears. So it's behind the back side of the ears are black. You can see them on the kits here. It's got a white tip tail as opposed to the black tip tail. And you can actually make that out on these two of the kits here in the picture. And then the dark mark where the scent gland is on the upper part of the tail. The other thing is the lower legs, we call them, we say it has black socks and black feet. That's really only visible from certain angles. You can notice on the fox on the left that the white tip tail is not really as apparent as if you had a different angle. So you got to keep that in mind. Okay, so here on the left, this is a typical picture. I get like a dozen of these pictures every year where the people think this is a coyote. Now, it's turned and looking towards the camera, so you can't really see definitively the black behind the ears, right? You can't really see the black legs because that shows up more from the front, but you can make out the white tip tail. Okay, so this is a yearling fox kit. And on the right, we have an adult coyote in the background, and then these are the young pups, the young of the year. And this is summertime. Both of these are in the summer. And you could see the black tip tail on this pup here, and there's no black on the lower legs. So those are the key things. And then here's an adult with the black tip tail. Also, the bushy tail hangs straight down. Most domestic dog breeds have a tail that curls upwards. Not all, but that eliminates a lot of dogs. When you have that tail hanging straight down, that's typical coyote with a black tip. Okay, so what do you think about this guy looking at us? You can see some black around the ears that's showing through, and there's definitely some black on the lower legs and the feet. So this is a fox kit. This is out my way in Bridgehampton, but this was thought to be a coyote. We got a lot of reports of coyotes at this golf course, but it was a fox family living there. And you can't make out the white tip because it's sitting in the white sand, unfortunately. Okay, and here on the left, okay, there's no black behind the ears, really. No black feet. You can't see the tails. So if you were to get a photo of this, we'd be very excited because this is the gray fox, which we do have on Long Island. It's very, very rare. And we're hoping to launch a project this year to determine the distribution of them. They are currently allowed to be trapped on Long Island, and we don't think that there's a population that justifies that. And on the right, even though it's moving along, you know, when you're out in the field, you might be driving your car, you know, you're just going to get a quick glimpse of an animal, but you can't miss that white tip tail. And that's the red fox in the summer coat. I think we've already looked at this guy. Sorry about that, on the left. So on the right, I got a call from one of the villages on Long Island. that they had a coyote, a dead coyote that was found in someone's pool, drowned and bad shape. And before I drove all the way over there to retrieve the carcass, they managed to send me a photograph, and there's 5 toes on this animal, and the canids all have 4 toes. So this is actually a raccoon. It saved me a lot of time in driving. And fine, this is my last slide. So this is the gray fox. So we're going to be launching this project, a Long Island Mammal Survey, and it's going to be a citizen science component to this. So a lot of you in the audience might be interested in getting involved. If you have a trail camera or you want to invest in one and get involved in the project, we're going to be setting up sites to monitor for things like this gray fox. And notice the key thing here is it has that real bushy tail, but also this black stripe along the top of the tail. Okay, so that's it for me. Hildur?
Wonderful. And I have something I can't help but share since we were talking about.
Oh,
foxes.
yeah.
Can you see these?
Yeah,
For
that's
everyone
great.
here, we have cameras at the Science Museum, and this is our resident fox family doing well. And here they are playing. This is actually a video from last year, but you can see it's from April. And they're very cute, but they're out rather early for them, I feel. 1:23. Do you see? I saw the other pup was at the golf course in bright daylight. So is that something you see them get out that early for them?
You mean in terms of the daytime?
Yeah.
Yeah. Generally, what I found is that if they feel very comfortable in a setting, they're not so attuned to being active at night.
Yeah.
And that's true of the otter work that I'm doing as well. So Long Island is very developed, and there's a lot of people moving around through the area, through their habitat. So in parts of Long Island, the otters are very nocturnal, and in other parts of Long Island, you can see them in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Out fishing, yeah.
And for the love of dogs, this is a perfect transition point. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Mike. Frank Vincenti, and the founder of Wild Dog Foundation. If I am correct, there was a coyote, one of the first captured in Queens. It could count as Long Island, right? Was named after you. That's how I first heard about Frank. That coyote was called Frankie. And I said, who is this guy? And then we got to track together, and just, I want to thank you for all the work you've been doing for wild dogs, and give you the floor now for your 10 minutes, and then we'll go into the Q&A part. And for the audience, if you'd like to, you can start lining up with an electronic hand with questions, or share your questions in the chat as we're opening up. After Frank's contribution, we are opening up for a lively conversation. I'm sure there are a lot of questions in the audience. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks for having me. Very honored to be here. I'm grateful to Hildur and Kristen, and to share the bill with Dr. Filippi and Mike Bottini. I guess the burden falls on me to try to convince the public to coexist with our new arrival here on Long Island. So, I've been lecturing on Long Island for the last decade, trying to get Long Islanders educated, trying to get them coyote savvy or coyote knowledgeable. Unfortunately, coyotes only seem to make the news when there's some sort of conflict. So my specialty is actually mitigating and preventing conflicts. And I've done this up in Westchester, Kristen's old neighborhood, in New York City and northern New Jersey. And I've done it here on Long Island, even with the ones that we've had here, we do have here. And mind you, I'm sure Dr. Filippi and Mike Bottini will agree, is we've had coyotes for 5 years now on the island. So that's half a decade. And they've been very well acclimated and coexisting in many cases. I mean, many of the coyotes that we are following, and I'm following an individual south of the northern state, they frequent areas that are high density people and their pets. And there's really been no conflict. I mean, despite what's said on social media, and there's all sorts of accusations on social media, in reality, the animals have not really conflicted with anyone. As you can see, even with my photograph, this is from my trail cameras of one of the individuals that I've been following, is most of their activity is in the wee hours of the night. So they're making every effort to avoid people and even avoid dogs. I mean, one of our colleague Russ Burke is following a family on the North Shore that where they exist, there's regular dog walkers all the time, even unfortunately off-leash dogs. And the animals have never taken an issue with the dogs. Now, do coyotes get territorial with dogs? Of course they do. We've seen that in other areas. Is that something we could be aware of here on Long Island, at least to be aware of it and have it in the back of our mind? Yeah, but it's easy common sense things to coexist with coyotes. Has there been encounters, especially with the one I've been following? I would call them encounters. I wouldn't call them aggressive or anything else. Like I said, most of the activity is in the wee hours of the night. And strangely enough, there are people that go walking or walk their dogs, or even one individual at one of my lectures jogs in the middle of the night. And, this animal is out at that time and doesn't really run into people too often. It sees these activities and it's slightly curious. And there's been video of it, an individual walking their dog, and the coyote had taken curiosity, kept its distance, showed no aggression whatsoever. And once its curiosity was satisfied, it ambled off. And the individual and their dog behaved perfectly correct. They were not antagonistic, even though part of my suggestions are that people do act aggressively if they encounter the coyote. This way they can instill some sort of fear and avoidance on the animals. Because like Mike said before, and Dr. Filippi, coyotes do get acclimated like any other kind of wildlife. They become used to our activities. They can become somewhat complacent. And
Yeah.
it's not unusual for them to be out during the day, when they become comfortable. And, we as the public could easily rectify and change that, alter that behavior, get them to go back to being cryptic and elusive, which is what we want.
Basically rewilding them. So what you're talking about is hazing.
Exactly.
Keeping
Sort of
them
like
from
rewilding.
being habituated. Yeah.
Exactly. Very good point. So, that's easily done with simple steps. And my organization actually does this. Like I said, I've done it throughout the tri-state, and even with, ironically, the animals that Dr. Filippi is following, prior to them winding up in the area that she's tracking them, they were in a residential area. They were being fed, unfortunately. So my organization came in and sort of hazed them, deterred them. We couldn't stop the feeding because the public didn't want to listen, but our sort of humanely harassing them and discouraging them got them to move off. And thankfully they're in a much better area that Dr. Filippi is doing a fantastic job monitoring them. So, but this could be done by easy steps, and it's common sense stuff. It's basically almost dog training. When you do encounter coyotes, and I don't suspect this to be a common occurrence here on Long Island, because I'm sure my colleagues will agree that the population growth, even though we've seen several new transients, as we call them, individuals that are making their way onto the island and trying to find either a mate or establish a territory. The population climb has been very slow. So, I'm some of you may get it all the time. Some of you might say it that, the coyote population is going to boom and it's going to be uncontrollable. And that's just not the case. It's a challenge for them to get here. It's another challenge to find the opposite sex to create a mated pair. We had originally 3 breeding pairs back in 2019. One of the pairs seemed to have disappeared. They had a youngster that I was monitoring, and for some reason the pack disappeared. So they may have split up and wound up somewhere else. But the 2 veritable breeding pairs, one that Dr. Filippi is following and one our colleague Russ Burke is following, they haven't really bred consistently. So that's sort of how coyotes regulate themselves for whatever reasons. Either the feeding wasn't good, or they just forego breeding. We have yet to figure it out, but they have not bred in successive years. So the coyote population is not going to get where it's so exasperated on the island that we're going to have coyotes behind every rock and tree. That's just not the way it works, right? They're regulated by habitat and space, food availability. Certainly, other coyotes, the desire of, coyotes are basically little wolves. They're territorial with each other. They don't want to conflict with rivals. So that will keep their populations somewhat regulated. But getting into coexisting, it's simple things. Don't feed wildlife. I can't stress it enough. It's my organization is so vehemently against any kind of feeding wildlife. It often results in a death sentence for the wildlife. People claim to be well-intentioned. They want to feed them. Youngsters are endearing, whether they're coyote pups or fox kits or raccoon kits or whatever. The temptation for some of the public to put food out is always there. And that to me is probably the biggest challenge of having an animal like the coyote on the island. Not that coyotes are easily, seduced into doing such things. They're very suspicious of us. They're very leery. But unfortunately, here on the island, such a hyper-urban landscape, there's just so much of this human oriented food sources available, whether it's garbage or feeding pets outside. It's just there, and coyotes are not going to pass it up. So for the most part, they won't associate people with that food. But if you do directly feed, they could associate that feeding as a food reward. And in some cases, and coyote conflicts are very rare. They're very rare. I mean, you could go on the internet and find any salacious website that'll tell you anything you want to hear. But even though coyote conflicts are somewhat on the rise, because as mentioned by my colleagues, coyotes are found in every major metropolis right now. They're still relatively rare, considering how many coyotes live in urban environments. So I don't see that being an extreme issue on Long Island, as we are trying to be proactive and get the public to just be coyote smart, as other groups have done, coyote savvy, common sense stuff. Don't feed wildlife. If you're walking dogs, it's always preferable dogs be on a leash, all right? A 4 to 6 foot leash, which most dog trainers would recommend. This way you have control of your dog. Coyotes on occasion do get territorial with dogs, and on rare events, if they do have pups, they might take issue with the presence of dogs. You as the dog owner, having your dog on a short leash, you have control of the situation. The dog is with you. And even the DEC is now using many of my things that I've said over the years and other lectures that I've done with the DEC, in fact, is that try to get the coyote's attention that the dog is with the human, and the coyote's innate fear of humans associates that dog with people, and that automatically, negates any kind of possible aggression the coyote might have toward the dog. Now, this is just if it does come to that. I'm not saying that it would. All right. Like I said, the coyotes that we were following, they're surrounded by dogs constantly. and never once have they been aggressive, even the ones that have had pups. And it's usually when coyotes have pups during the spring and summer in other areas. And again, we can't take what's happened in other areas and use that as a foundation of what might be on Long Island. Long Island is already proven to be very unique and distinct from other areas, and how the coyotes are behaving, how they're eating, and how they're interacting with the public. It's also, we have this unprecedented opportunity, which my colleagues would agree with me, at least I would hope you would, is that we have the chance to get Long Islanders to be, unlike other areas where they're already knowledgeable about the coyotes, they know how to coexist with them, and they know how to interact safely with their pets and everything else. Whereas other communities, they're either oblivious to the presence of coyotes, and this is a fact, or they have no will in coexisting or accepting the presence of wildlife. And I've done many lectures in the northern suburbs, and I could attest that there are many communities, well-educated communities, that just have no will to do common sense things. And they have continuous problems. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that Long Islanders could show the rest of the country that they are adept at coexisting with the wildlife. They appreciate that wildlife has come back to the island, all right, and could go about this appreciating biodiversity and everything else. As far as coyotes, interacting with people in the negative, like I said, it's very rare. Dr. Filippi, did you go into rabies at all, Dr. Filippi? No. Well, rabies is very rare in coyotes. Unfortunately, with the last decade, the 7 incidents that have occurred with coyotes biting people, and I'll only say that they bit people. No one's been savagely mauled or anything else like that. It's been a bite. There's far more incidents with local dogs that conflict with the public than coyotes. Hundreds and thousands of more cases with dogs than coyotes. The 7 incidents that we've had within the last decade were all attributed to rabies. And this was some incidents in northern New Jersey, Rockland, and Westchester. But this is over a decade, 7 individual coyotes. That's really not a lot of animals. Right? And if you go on the DEC site and you look at rabies incidents with coyotes, you could count on your one hand how many coyotes have contracted rabies in the state. We're talking about the state. So it doesn't mean that coyotes don't get rabies. They certainly could, but they're very smart, and their population density is not that large because, as you know, other species that occur at higher densities could be more prone to rabies, such as raccoons, skunk, occasionally fox. But we don't have an issue with rabies on the island. We're an island. We're separated from the mainland. So whatever zoonosis or epidemics might affect the mainland, I don't see it really affecting our coyotes or even fox here. Foxes, as Mike and Dr. Filippi would agree, Hildur as well, those fox kits there scratching like that, I'm hoping it's fleas. I hope it's not sarcoptic mange, because mange is really devastating fox populations here on the island. And coyotes are prone to sarcoptic mange. They certainly could catch it. Their population density being low means that they have a lesser chance of acquiring it, but they most certainly can get it. Canine distemper is another thing. If your dogs are vaccinated for canine distemper, you're fine. There's nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, raccoons, fox, and coyote are subjected to canine distemper. And it's out there. And, that unfortunately, that might be what wipes out litters. Out the animals that we've been following may have had other litters that were wiped out by distemper or parvovirus. Parvovirus is very deadly to puppies. So maybe there were other incidents of breeding. But another very polarizing topic, my organization, like I said, we do the hazing if the community wants, as an extension of the Long Island Coyote Study Group, or independently or whatever. We like to work together, but we know that issues with coyotes and cats, which is a very volatile topic, something. Now,
Yes, I see the questions are lining up, and I wanna start
yelling at me
opening
yet?
up the. Hmm?
Are they yelling at me yet?
No, and I wanted to also, since you mentioned cats, as
Right.
someone interested in ecosystem restoration, your cat should really be inside in the
Right.
first place, because the bird population is dramatically declined in North America and elsewhere. So that's
But
good service.
as you
Yeah.
know, in fairness to the cats, all right, maybe I'm getting anthropomorphic here, but there really is a terrible issue with people dumping and being irresponsible. And that is the foundation
Yeah.
of all this wildlife conflict, with cats being the consummate predator. You know, they take a toll on bird life and everything else. It's been proven that the presence of coyotes could increase bird life. I believe Dr. Filippi went into that.
Yes, and I
but-
wanted to encourage our audience to raise their electronic hands if they can find it in reactions. I have already
Are
received
they
by
all
chat.
avatars? They have electronic
No,
hands?
You can also speak up if
I
you're.
didn't know we were talking to robots.
We're gonna if you could show your video as well when you ask your question, if you want to ask it by voice. I see that Hus has a question, our education director, so I'll start with him. I saw that Ranger Eric Powers has a comment, and I can ask some that I received in the chat. Can coyotes mate with dogs is a question.
Yes, they can. It's not common, as Dr. Filippi and Mike Bottini said. The coyotes here in the Northeast have a degree of dog genes in them from prior matings over the last century, or even recently. I mean, I was involved with a family of coyotes in Queens some years ago that, was, had some dog genes in them. It's not common because of the fact that coyotes and wolves come into heat at a certain very brief time of the year, and domestic dogs, due to domestication, are, they're random in their breeding and heat cycles. So for animals to time it perfectly, it's not a common thing, but it does happen. So.
Yes, and that another question was, do they show any interest in eating Canada geese?
Yes.
And then a
Actually,
follow-up question was, are Canada geese smarter than roadrunners?
Yeah, they have actually, but they mostly prey on the nests, so the eggs and the young. But they have been known to take an adult, but mostly it's the young.
You want me to answer the feral cat thing? I was going to say before is that it's feral cats are part of the Long Island environment. Unfortunately for the cats, they're victims as well. But it's a reality that we have to accept. Is that cat colonies do exist on the island. There are many people that try to take care of them and do the right thing. Cats and coyotes have a complicated relationship. I've seen for myself, and Dr. Filippi has gotten on her trail cams the same cat with the same coyotes that I got from the year prior, the same coyotes I was hazing. That same cat would frequent the area where the coyotes were and went through it unscathed, never got molested by the coyotes at all. They can coexist. Cats are not stupid. Cats learn how to avoid the coyotes, feral cats at least, because they're out there. And in return to, in relevance to what Hildur said, is that as cats avoid the coyotes, bird life gets a reprieve from cat predation. So
Can I make a comment about that?
sure.
So one issue about the feral cats is that if there's a bunch of cats that are being fed, that's going to attract the coyote to both the
Right.
food and to the cats.
Right.
So feeding animals outdoors is really bad because it not only provides food directly for the coyotes, but it also provides food in terms of the animals that come to eat the food. that becomes
Right.
food for the coyotes. So
Right, well,
really
I mean.
bad
my
idea.
my suggestions for people that do take care of feral cats, if they want to listen or not, is that they could certainly maintain a colony by limiting the amount of food, like Dr. Filippi says. All too often, and it's hard work. These people put a lot of time in. They put out way too much food, and cats, if they're feral or if your cat was, what was your cat's name, Dr. Filippi, that was on your show?
Kahlua.
Kahlua. If it's Kahlua or a feral, cats are cats. They're going to eat a little bit and they're going to go lay down for 30 hours like they were miniature lions. So like Dr. Filippi said, if you overfeed a feral cat colony, all that leftover food is going to be taken advantage of by raccoons, possums, fox, coyotes, crows, seagulls, rats, you name it, they'll all come in and benefit. So limiting the feeding that you do towards the ferals, making sure if you have a large colony, I mean, more dominant cats, unfortunately, are going to eat, all that food, but those dominant cats are also going to keep the subordinate cats away from any kind of large feeding too. So not to make their job more difficult, but preferably feeding during the day. This way, not animals that are more, not that coyotes are strictly nocturnal, they're not, but their activity patterns tend to be more at night. This way, if the cats eat during the day and they finish it up, there's nothing left for anything else. So it can be done. We documented that currently the coyotes that we see now are sharing the space with a myriad of cats. And even though, there may have been some incidents of cat predation, coyotes preying on cats, it's not very common, not common at all.
Because they don't all feed in the same place at the same time every day.
Right.
They're just moving through the
Yes.
habitat until they can avoid each other. I see a
And we
question
have,
here.
yes, we have
Somebody
audience
asked about
participation.
feral cats. Somebody, don't feral cats just replace formerly present small carnivores such as bobcats and mustelids? So the thing about feral cats and birds is it's the songbirds that we worry about, the tiny birds. Those are the ones that are disappearing, and that's what the feral cats are eating. I have a feeling that bobcats and that level of predator was probably feeding on larger animals and probably small mammals. Maybe songbirds not such a preferred prey. Mike, what do you think about that?
Well, the feral cats are often in a colony setting, which is very unnatural, and so they have a larger impact on the local bird population.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so there's
and
many more of them.
we have a raised electronic hand that I want to acknowledge. We have a question from LDH. You need to name yourself.
Hi, Lawrence Haber. I have a question regarding safety of safety for humans and dogs. We haven't really spoken specifically about it, other than sort of what we shouldn't do and what we should do when we encounter. But in terms of actual numbers, like in the last 50 or 100 years, like I read, I don't know what's accurate. I trust the biologists' information about this, but they haven't really said that I heard. I heard 2 human attacks. I heard.
Maybe Mike
But
has
that
some
was like in
information
50
too,
or
but
100 years, which is like nothing,
so
Yeah,
I
an interesting statistic is the number of domestic dog attacks on humans, the number of, believe it or not, deaths caused by dog attacks
18 per
versus
year, right?
wild canids. It's there's no comparison at all.
Yeah.
And just for a personal experience, I've been doing a lot of work on Fisher's Island, which has had coyotes, breeding coyotes, and it's a very small island. I think it's 4 square miles. Breeding coyotes there since around 2010. So it's been 12 years. The school kids were collecting coyote scat for us, going out in the field, and there are no incidences at all of any problems with attacks of humans. Now there have been one of the people working with us, one of the volunteers mentioned that a neighbor had her small dog taken by coyotes, and I also learned from the museum over there, the Natural History Museum, there was a 20-year-long debate about what to do with the feral cat colony. So this is a place where there's a lot of people in the summer, and a few people tend to leave their cats behind, or they can't find them when they go on a leave. So they had a big problem with feral cats. The problem was defined as they lost all their grassland nesting birds. The museum was managing some areas for the grassland habitat, and the debate went on and on and on. And in around 2010, the coyotes showed up. And by the time I got there to do research on otters, the coyotes had taken out all the feral cats, and the grassland breeding birds had made a comeback. So every place is a little bit different, but that's just a personal story I know of. And there was some concern, I guess, with some of the parents about the kids going out into the coyote areas and collecting coyote scat for our genetic study. But they trooped on, and yeah, there hasn't been any problem with that. They do actually, people do see them there on Fires Island.
Because it's so
Fisher's
small.
Island.
It's so small.
Because it is so small. And then there was another question in here about, I think it was Eric actually, about hearing their calls. And on Fisher's Island, every time the noon whistle goes off, or there's a fire and the ambulance whistle goes off, the coyotes respond.
Now, I have a small dog, and if we're out for a walk with a small dog, we worry the dog might become a victim. So if we want to pick up the dog, the DEC in their recommendations, the handout I saw earlier, said that we shouldn't bend down, we should stand up tall. So if I'm bending down to pick up my dog, does that make me vulnerable?
Make it quick.
That's not gonna be that's not gonna happen. If you do it, like I said before, I don't know if you tuned in late, if you are walking your dog, you have your dog on a leash, right? You make your presence known in front of the coyote, so they could associate the dog and you together. Coyotes normally, will avoid these situations. They might show mild curiosity, which the one that I've been following south of the northern state has occasionally shown curiosity, but this is in the wee hours of the night. This is not during the day. And
But,
even
so
if they're
I
out-
should bend down, or I shouldn't bend down?
No,
Well, you should
you have your dog on a leash.
on a leash.
But just quickly.
You have your dog on a leash.
No, the dog's
Yeah.
always on a leash. The dog's
Good.
always on a leash.
All right.
Just-
Yeah.
Yell at the coyote, tell it to go away, all right? Make the coyote know that you and the dog are together. Sometimes they see the dog, all right, and they're fixated on the dog, and they need to be put back into reality that the dog is with the human. But
Right.
these incidents, like I said, my organization does this for the public. I don't get paid. I don't solicit money. I do this for free. I deter the coyotes in these scenarios. But if you show confidence, I mean, coyotes are dogs, all right? And they understand confidence. They understand that sort of behavior. So if you're confident with your dog, you have it secure on the leash, you're showing that you're not cowering, all right? Even if the coyote is showing mild curiosity, there's your dog.
He's very vulnerable.
He's
It's
got
a
a
very
good
vulnerable.
dog.
We have to
And
be af-
I'm
we have to
receiving
be
a
afraid of
lot of
owls.
questions.
Who's his
Yes,
hairdresser?
Can I just make one comment, Hildur, because he asked about specific numbers, and I spent a lot of time online today trying to find specific numbers, and I was a little disheartened that I couldn't find it all in one place, but I did get numbers. So on average, and my graduate student did some of this work too, but I looked it up again today and I couldn't find anything more than what she found last summer. So in terms of dog deaths from dogs, it's about 18 per year. And this is over like a 40-year period, 38 years. But for coyotes, it's only bites, and that's less than 6 a year. And in the entire record that I could find for coyotes, period, there have been only 2 deaths. Whereas for dogs,
So
there's
that's what
18
you must
deaths
have read the
per
same
year.
Wikipedia article.
18 deaths per year. So it's extremely rare. Does it never happen? No, but Frank, what I want you to do is
Be
just
more
explain
afraid of
to
your
people
neighbor's dog.
about hazing.
Mhm.
And the place that I have been monitoring, I go out there every other week. I'm out there for 2 hours, and I have seen the coyote once myself. And
Yeah.
there are 6 of them out there. And somebody that I was with actually saw a coyote, but we glimpsed it, and not even long enough so I could take a photograph. So they are extremely shy. I know they're there, but I don't see them. I see them on my cameras. So they don't want to be near people. And I see people walking on trails and things, and I never see coyotes in the pictures with the people. So I'm monitoring these cameras. So Frank, why don't you just describe what hazing is? So make
Well,
yourself
first,
thinking
first,
confident in what else
I'm-
people.
Can I just
Go ahead.
ask quickly? I'm receiving a
sure.
lot of questions in the chat directly to me and in the chat about the feral cat population specifically in Manhasset, and they want us to answer whether the feral cat population in Manhasset will be affected. It's a specific concern that I'm receiving a lot of direct
I would
messaging
expect that it
about.
would be. I
Yes,
would expect that it would be.
yeah.
Um,
From my observations, I see that the colonies are still persisting, even with coyotes that have been, the ones that I'm following, coyotes have been here for half a decade. And I don't see them devastating any of
I
the,
don't think it'll be devastated, but you don't think it'll be affected at all?
well, I think cats will learn, they'll adapt to the coyotes, which they are in some cases, and they'll avoid them. And this in turn will benefit everything else.
Except that the food is always put out in the same place.
Right, well,
Right.
yeah, these people are always, that's their duty is to feed these cats, but limiting the amount of food placed out there would not benefit any other animals that might have conflicts. And in some ways, maybe the cats could learn to stay at the feeding stations, finish it up and lay up. Once coyotes realize that there's nothing to gain there, they'll probably avoid these areas. So, and the cats will avoid venturing further afield, knowing that coyotes are out there. So, I mean, this is all happenstance, but, maybe we're in an island, it's a bubble of a science project,
Uncharted
so,
territory.
so
Yeah, and I saw tracks once where there was a cat, it got away and the coyote went the other way. You could see
Yeah.
that
well,
the
I have
cat went into
I
the,
have pictures on Facebook with the last snow we had of the coyotes walking on the track and cats walking on top of the coyote tracks. So
Mhm.
it's, you could think of it as a miniature Africa. You have lions, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas. I mean, sometimes they try to kill each other, but they're all living and sharing the space, partitioning the
Yeah.
habitat. That's what I see with the cats and the coyotes. So
Interesting.
and on that note, in the chat, there's a lot of questions about foxes and coyotes. And as we're concerned about our resident fox, what's the relationship there? Then we'll get to who's, and we'll get to Steve Bailey. I see your hand. Maybe if we could just address
Yeah,
the fox.
Okay, so the red fox issue is that there is some information in the literature about the foxes getting killed by coyotes. But as a general rule, they as Frank was saying, they just rearrange
Each other.
their respective territories, and the foxes will, just because of the scent that the coyotes leave along the edge of the territory, they'll know where the boundary is and they'll adjust to that. And it all comes down to different situations and how much food is available, with those. So that's another factor, but Long Island doesn't have, one of the things about Long Island is we lost a lot of the big predators. So we have a lot of prey and they're both omnivores. So yeah, plenty of food around. So I expect not to lose the fox population. However, I do expect to get a benefit from the coyotes limiting the population size of foxes and raccoons. And that is that we have a boom and bust cycle on Long Island with both species. The population gets so big that that density-dependent diseases run amok through the population and devastate them. And that was something Frank mentioned earlier. The big one is sarcoptic mange, which doesn't kill the animal, but it severely compromises their immune system. So they're more susceptible to other diseases that they would normally be able to handle. So it'd be nice to see those populations level out more.
I just wanted to.
Yes,
add,
and
like, I wanted just to add with the fox and coyote thing is that they're seeing that the relationship in urban areas, like Mike said, there's such an abundance of food that interspecific conflict where coyotes are actually physically aggressive towards foxes. In many cases, they don't see that. What they see is the coyote is sort of taking the role of like the spotted hyena in Africa, even though hyenas are superb hunters in their own right. But say the fox is like the leopard, where the leopard makes a kill. The hyena comes in and tries to and takes the food. And that's how, you know, the interactions are for the most part in urban areas. Coyotes don't have to be physically aggressive towards foxes. They just need to sit and watch them, you know, procure a meal and then come in and take it, and they had a free meal. So.
And the one question was, do foxes howl?
No,
They yip.
no, they'll scream. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Dr. Filippi, go ahead.
No, they yip, right? Those beep.
They have like
have-
a chirp.
They have a lot of
Sure.
different vocalizations, actually.
Who's has a question here, actually? Because
just-
I want to be respectful of time. I want to get to
Oh, yeah.
who's and
I'll be
Steve
quick.
Bailey.
And I just want to say to the participants who are worried about coyotes maybe on their walks, I'll share what I share with our students, our young students who are scared. Just remember that you're quite a large animal yourself. So show your size and exert yourself. And we have some might too. So don't forget that.
Make noise and act crazy.
Yeah. So my
That's the fun
question
part.
was, and it sounds like the answer is going to be no, but is this really a unique situation where we're kind of the last area that, you know, that we can kind of track this spread recently? Or is there another, like, what was the last place that this happened with, if there was one, where it was an area that they were not found, and what was kind of the public response in that area? Because what I'm concerned about is if there's public backlash on Long Island, is there any history of like even like policy changes or any kind of thing against the coyotes or anything like that?
Interesting.
Well, in a nutshell, we have over 100 years of experience in trying to eliminate the coyote from
I'm not gonna have
most
it.
of the United States, where it was originally found and where it's found today. And yeah, we were no contest with the coyote.
And 100 years of failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and including
Gotcha.
a lot of
They
things
just
that
learn to
impacted
live
a
with
lot of
them.
other animals, like poisoning carcasses and things like that.
I've heard that they grow bigger when they're attacked, like in population size, that they respond with larger litters. Is that correct?
Yes, if you try to remove them, then the neighboring pair will make even more pups than they normally would.
Right.
So they immediately fill in any gaps.
Yeah, not larger in size in terms of the animal,
The
but larger in
number, the
terms of
number.
litter, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And then just real quick, because I think Dr. Filippi was you brought this up earlier. So to me, hazing is like ooga booga, loud noises. I just wanted to know from an academic standpoint, is there a more refined technique when you do it
No,
out in the
crazy.
field?
Yeah. Frank, what do you do?
Booga booga works.
Ooga
Yeah.
booga works.
Ooga booga.
Okay.
Listen, you could, you know, my experience is, I mean, I aggressively go chase them, and it works all the time. And I've done it where it's like Pavlov's dog, where the coyotes, I had coyotes in northern New Jersey where they knew the sound and smell of my car. And all I had to do was drive up, and they anticipated me getting out of the car and chasing them. And that
Oh,
was
wow.
enough to shoot them into the woods. So that's how smart they are. I mean,
Right.
Running away is not a good idea, right, Frank?
What?
Running
Say it again.
away?
never run from anything.
Yeah.
Never run unless it's like 50 dudes chasing you, then you should run. But don't run from any wildlife. You know, a lot of these communities I've spoken to, like up in Westchester, it's like simply yelling at them is enough because a lot of people don't do it. And when coyotes get yelled at, you know, they're like that spoiled child that's never been yelled at, you know, and they're like shocked and they're unnerved by it and they run off. And I know that sounds ridiculous to people that are scared of the situation. I totally empathize with them, but it's the fact, it's the truth. And a lot of other organizations throughout the country, even state wildlife agencies will tell you the simplest thing often works. If you want to walk with an air horn, if you want to walk with a can of a cage to rattle, you know, all that works if whatever is your comfort level. But mine is, you know, if I see them, you know, I act very aggressively. I act, you know, as if I was a wolf chasing the coyote off, and they get that and they understand that. So, I mean, there are cases where they'll run off and they'll stop and they're wondering, you know, why are you chasing me? Because they've never been chased before. And that's normal. You have to push it. You know, it's not like somebody's dog got out of the fence, their gate, and if you went to go get it, they might bite you. Because dogs are, you know, used to people. Coyotes have an innate fear of people. They're not a gang. They're not a criminal. They're not going to turn on you. They're not vindictive. They're not spiteful. You know, so you chase them off, you scare them, and it works. And we have that opportunity now to teach these coyotes, you know, in future generations to be good Long Island citizens and maybe pay their taxes too.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This was incredible.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And Steve Bailey.
I got to live in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 10 years. And coyotes, if you didn't see a coyote every day, it was kind of odd. They're all over the place. And the one thing that we learned about coyotes, and everybody there knew, was coyotes are really smart and they'll pick up on this schedule of when you let your dog out in the morning to go out in the backyard and do its business, or when you're letting your cat out, or when the cat wants to come back in the house at night. Coyotes would learn the schedule and hang out. And I think that's going to be the biggest impact on Long Island for coyotes. Is there's so many people who just are into habits of letting their animals out to roam around, especially cats and dogs and small dogs. And they're very, very, coyotes will pick right up on that, and they'll nail your dog, they'll nail your cat. We saw that all the time in Santa Fe. And you just learn not to let your cat out and not to let your dog out when you're not standing there. And like everybody said, you know, a big person is not going to be attacked by a coyote generally, and your dog will be safe.
A little dog might. A little dog.
Yeah, little dogs are considered lunch. You know.
So we have to change our behavior. We have to modify our behavior. And so I was just thinking earlier today that people that live in the city behave differently than people that live in the suburbs. You become street smart, right? You're more aware of the people around you. You hold on to your purse. I always turn my pocketbook around. I walk with my keys webbed through my fingers. I mean, we have little things that we do to protect ourselves when we're in different places. And I think it's the same thing. We just have to readjust our thinking and we'll be fine. My two neighbors next door have these two little tiny dogs that they always let out. And I said, you really shouldn't do that. So people are going to have to learn. And it's just something that we're going to have to get used to, just like we get used to everything else. We got used to COVID, damn it. We can get used to anything.
I'd rather take my chances with coyotes than the New York subway right now. So got to think of it that way too.
Yeah. A little bit of tweaking. That's all. Tweaking of the behavior.
Steve is right. And Dr. Filippi touches on it perfectly. But, you know, also, a lot of these other areas, like I said before, we can't always attribute the conflicts elsewhere to what might be on Long Island. These areas have generation upon generation of coyotes acclimating to urban environments and change. And yeah, some of them do. There's a study in Southern California where cats do factor in a major part of their diet. Why? Maybe because of the weather is conducive for people leaving cats outdoors. Maybe this is a generational thing where coyotes learned that there's so many abundant outdoor cats that, with, drought conditions and the loss of water and everything else, it's hard to find prey. Cats are a perfect substitute. We could nip that in the bud here on Long Island by being aware. And we can't say necessarily that it's going to happen here. It could be a totally different thing that takes place here. Long Island's a distinct environment altogether. So.
I see a hand up. Whose hand is up?
Yes, Barbara. I'm busy
Oh, Barbara
in
Travers.
the chat.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
I haven't seen Lisa in 50 years, probably. I am an interloper. I am not on Long Island. I'm just outside Seattle, Washington, but I am a former Long Islander, and this really caught my eye because we have coyotes. We live with coyotes, and this is my pet coyote.
Well, we're not going to make pets out of them.
Yeah, no, he's not a pet, and I have an outdoor camera, and they roam around all night long. And I love listening to this because I don't know much about their personalities, except they do eat a lot of cats, they eat a lot of rabbits, they eat a lot of squirrels. I have a small dog. I would never let him out alone, ever, because these guys are smart. I have seen them circle. One will distract you, and there's two more in the bushes, and that's how. And they're they're very smart. So they do this. I've seen them walk down the street in front of my house, and I did what, I don't know your name, savewilddogs@yahoo.com, but
Right.
I yell at them. I just yell at them, and they scatter and they run. So I'm sick and tired of them. I don't like living with them, and I don't want to kill them. I just want them to go elsewhere. So this is what I researched, and this is what I'm doing, and it's working because I have cameras set up, nighttime cameras. And so I have this. I don't know if it's backwards or not, but
No, it's not. It's fine.
So I've been doing this now for over a month. I have these little canisters, and they go on these little like shepherd's hooks that I have. I live above a ravine above Lake Washington, and I put 3 of them out, and the wolf urine deters them, the coyotes and the bobcats. I have bobcats too, and I know it's working because it's been 6 weeks, and I look at my camera, and they're not coming around anymore. So my goal is to deter them. I don't want them in my backyard. So that's how I live with coyotes. It doesn't hurt anybody else. It's just bobcats and coyotes. I have tons of raccoons and all the other critters, and they don't bother me. But I don't want my dog, to be
Barbara,
eaten.
could I ask you a question?
Mhm.
I've seen this many times with the wolf urine. Some people have even used coyote urine as, a territorial marker, as a rival coyote to keep the coyotes out. Did you just start doing this now, this time of the year, or?
About 6 weeks ago, we put the first little canisters out, and because they were getting more. They were coming more often.
This is the denning time. And, coyotes, usually their territories shrink during the denning season. I mean, the pups are probably born at the end of the month. So maybe that's why you're not seeing too much activity.
I've read that too. I thought maybe, but.
Yeah, no, well, I'm not opposed. If people want to put wolf urine all over their yard, their dog might be neurotic about it, but I'm not opposed to that. But I've seen where, coyotes are dogs, as you know, and, they do mark over wolves in Yellowstone, and wolves will mark over them. So, it's like any other dogs on the fire hydrant. They're all leaving their message, like that video. I'm not going to say this is a family show, but dogs cursing at each other. So whatever works. I wanted to bring up something too in that regards, which is similar to what you're doing, Barbara, but in a different way. My 2 colleagues, one from upstate New York and the other from Boston, they there's been a great article about what we call flagry. All right. Flagry is like an ancient method of deterring predators that they did in Europe, where they stream flags, little flags around as a barrier, and they flap in the wind. And that totally unnerves predators.
Oh,
So what my two colleagues, Lisa Abel and John Magaranis, they've recommended something similar to flagry, where you could put up balloons on your property, or even the party pinwheels. And of course, like Steve was alluding to before about coyotes getting used to things, he's right. You'd have to change it up every so often, because coyotes, though they know everything in their territory, they get totally unnerved by anything unusual, but then they get used to it. And you have to change it around. But these objects are a simple, cheap way to maybe just throw coyotes off if you don't want them in your yard.
I like that. I also read about lights and spraying water, like a sprinkler that'll go off if he walks in front of it.
Yeah, that works too. A lot of people recommend that sprinklers that are motion censored, they go off when the animal comes in. But if you have a very vain coyote that wants a shower, he's probably not going to work.
Well, that would be a lot cheaper than this, I'll tell you.
And there are vain coyotes. Well, if you could take the smell of wolf urine, God bless you, Bob.
I have people. I don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to just comment on a few. I'm getting a lot of concerns because of neighbors of Leeds Pond Preserve, concerned to live in proximity with nature, and I think what we're discussing here, yes, we're more vulnerable to wildlife when we live close to a preserve, but at the same time we can take precautions. So that's what we're discussing here, and knowing what we know about our ecosystem, water quality, we can't keep cutting into natural areas. We need to expand on the preserves that we have, and that'll keep the coyote from bleeding into the residential areas. So I'm seeing a lot of concern though, and I want to be respectful of our direct neighbors at Leeds Pond Preserve. I haven't seen any coyotes on our cameras, and they're not by us. We have one residential fox couple that never really bother even campers. We have campers, so we're very concerned, and I want to really accentuate the safety features here, that we have cameras, we are monitoring, and we're only seeing the fox. And I think Leeds Pond Preserve itself it's only 36 acres, and so we're not worried about our campers. We're not worried, and I think if you're I saw in the chat there was a sharing of a piece of leg that was left outside someone's door. We do have a lot of raccoons, and they can be vicious, and other wildlife as well. So if it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a coyote by you. And I'd love to hear from the experts like Mike and Lisa, Frank, just speak on that.
Well, I'm often here very late at night, like tonight, and I hear the owls, but no coyotes.
The great horned owl, yes. And there is benefit living next to a preserve. You have beautiful bird song, you have a place to take a walk. It's good for the mental health and emotional well-being in this time, physical health as well. We have beautiful trails on the preserve, and we need to conserve what's left of the wild places. And on that note, especially the wetlands, so very little left of healthy wetlands on Long Island. It's a real concern for our water quality. We need to recharge the aquifers. At the Science Museum, we have we received 50,000 from the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, where we have built bioswales and other ways to receive stormwater and help with the water quality. We are starting regenerative projects around Manhasset Bay as well, and we're very concerned about the algal bloom and this state of nature by us, and we welcome your participation in this. And thank you everyone for still being here. It's an incredible attendance. We really love that we're able to have this conversation.
Steve Finkelstein was asking for information where we could get, where they can get information. We have the flyer. We don't have a huge bunch of stuff, but I think Seatuck, Mike, you have information on Seatuck.
Yeah, on we have a section specifically on coyotes and on the website, and there's also videos from the Long Island Natural History Conference of Chris Nagy and Mark Weckel, both involved with studying coyotes for a long time in the New York City area. So the videos that describe a lot of the ecology and other aspects of coyote behavior.
Yes, and we can send the flyer to everyone in attendance here. And please become citizen scientists. Help us monitor their movement. And as I will also agree with everyone here, it's rare to see a fox or a coyote because they don't really want to be around us. And for anyone living near us, we haven't had any, we haven't captured any on camera. And we have volunteers here. I see in the chat. Thank you. We'll reach out to you. I'll save the chat. Anything we didn't get to tonight, we will get to by email. We will be emailing a response to all the questions. We couldn't cover everything tonight. And so we will continue this conversation as well. We'll be offering quarterly community education like this in a similar format on areas of interest to us and something that's relevant to us. We would love your feedback if you want to email us at the Science Museum, feedback from tonight, further questions, anything that we can do to help you live in good relation to nature and the wildlife that's at the preserve. And thank you very much for joining us. Our email is info@smli.org. And thank you to our panelists. We've reached time. We're at 8:37, so I'm going to let you go back to your families. And thank you for giving us your time tonight, and everyone who is still here with us. And to everyone who is still listening or looking at the recording, thank you for your attention. Attention is the greatest gift we can give each other. Our presence, attention, education. And thank you for tonight.
Thank you for hosting, Hildur. Thank you for sponsoring this.
Yes, thank you. Yep. Okay, so can I go get a beer now?